In a sealed archive in Istanbul, there is a piece of gazelle-skin parchment, painted in 1513. That should not exist. Drawn on it, in faded ink, is a coastline, a long curving southern shore, with bays and rivers and inland mountains. And when modern researchers laid it over a globe, their blood ran cold, because that shore matches the coast of Antarctica, the way it looks, underneath the ice. The map is real. It is signed by a real man, an Ottoman admiral named Piri Reis. It hangs in the Topkapi Palace Museum. You can look it up, and on the map itself, in his own hand, Piri Reis writes a confession. He did not draw this from life. He copied it from older charts that came from somewhere further back. So here is the question that has haunted this parchment for a century. If the coast under the Antarctic ice has been frozen for millions of years, long before our species drew its first breath, then who drew the map of what was underneath? Let's start with the man, because he is not a legend. His full name was Ahmed Muhyiddin Piri. History remembers him as Piri Reis. Reis meaning captain. He was born around 1465 in the Ottoman Empire, and he went to sea as a boy, sailing under his uncle, a famous Mediterranean corsair. By the time he was a grown man, Piri Reis had raided coastlines from Spain to North Africa. He had fought in fleet battles. He had seen the edges of the known world with his own eyes. But Piri Reis was something rarer than a fighter. He was a geographer, an obsessive one. He spent decades collecting charts, Portuguese maps, Spanish maps, Arab maps, and a category he describes only as ancient, maps from the time of Alexander the Great and older. He gathered them the way a scholar hoards forbidden books. And then, in the year 1513, he sat down and stitched a piece of them together into a single world map. Only a fragment of that 1513 map survives. About a third of it. It shows the western coast of Africa, the eastern coast of South America, and then, running along the bottom edge, a strange, anomalous southern landmass. A long shore that bends eastward and disappears off the torn edge of the parchment. For 400 years, nobody knew what to make of it. And then, in 1929, the map was rediscovered, and the trouble began. November 1929. The old Topkapi Palace in Istanbul is being converted into a museum. A German theologian and Orientalist named Gustav Adolf Deissmann is cataloging the imperial collection. In a dusty bundle of disused materials, he finds it, the gazelle-skin fragment, painted, illuminated, signed. He recognizes the name Piri Reis. He recognizes something else, too. In the New World, on the western edge, there are place names, notes, and one of them refers to Christopher Columbus. This is the first shock. Piri Reis wrote, in his own marginal notes, that one of his source maps for the Americas was a chart drawn by Columbus himself. Columbus had crossed the Atlantic only 21 years earlier, in 1492. His own original maps are lost, every single one of them gone. But here, in Istanbul, is a 16th-century Ottoman copy that may preserve a piece of the lost map of the man who found America. That alone would make this parchment priceless. But that is not why people lose their minds over it. They lose their minds over the bottom of the map, because in 1956, a Turkish naval officer donated a copy of the Piri Reis map to the United States Navy Hydrographic Office, and it landed on the desk of a man named Me Walters, who handed it to a cartographic engineer named Arlington Mallory. Mallory looked at that anomalous southern coast, the one that bends off the edge, and he said something nobody was ready for. He said, "That is Antarctica, and the ice isn't on it." To understand why that claim is explosive, you have to understand Antarctica. The southern continent is buried under an ice sheet up to 3 miles thick. We did not even confirm its coastline existed until the 1820 seconds. We did not map the land underneath the ice, the actual rock, the actual bedrock coast, until 1949, using seismic soundings, bouncing shock waves through the ice to read the shape of the ground beneath. So here is the collision. In 1949, A joint British-Swedish expedition produces the first map of the land under the Queen Maud Land ice. And when Mallory and others overlay the Piri-Reis southern coast onto that subglacial map, the bays line up, the peninsulas line up, the mountain ranges inland line up, a coastline that no human eye could have seen because it had been entombed under ice for, by the conventional account, millions of years, appears to be drawn on a piece of parchment from 1513. In 1965, a professor of the history of science at Keene State College, a man named Charles Hapgood, published a book called Maps of the Ancient Sea Kings. Hapgood and his students spent years analyzing the Piri-Reis map and others like it. His conclusion was staggering, and he had the credibility to make people listen. He argued the map preserved the geography of Antarctica's Queen Maud Land coast, as it appeared before the ice. And then Hapgood did something that turned the academic world against him. He wrote to the United States Air Force, and the Air Force wrote back. On the 6th of July, 1960, Lieutenant Colonel Harold Z. Ohlmeyer, commander of the 8th Reconnaissance Technical Squadron, signed a letter to Hapgood, and in it he wrote, and these are close to his actual words, that the geographical detail in the lower part of the map agreed remarkably with the seismic profile of the Antarctic ice cap made in 1949. He wrote that the bottom of the continent, shown on the map, appeared to have been mapped before it was covered by ice. A United States Air Force officer put that in writing on letterhead. Now, before we let the goosebumps take over, let's read what Piri-Reis himself wrote on the map, because the man was honest. In the marginal notes, in Ottoman Turkish, he tells you exactly what he did. He says he compiled this single chart from roughly 20 source maps. Some were contemporary Portuguese charts of the new discoveries. Some were Arabic maps. And some, he writes, were maps drawn in the time of Alexander the Great, which he calls the maps of the ancient infidels. Think about what that sentence does. Piri-Reis is telling us, in 1513, that he is copying coastlines from maps that were already ancient to him, maps from 2,000 years before his own time. And the unspoken implication, the one that gives Hapgood and the ancient mystery researchers their opening, is that those source maps were themselves copies of copies, a chain of cartography reaching back into the dark, back past Alexander, back past Egypt, back, perhaps, to whoever first stood on a southern shore and drew what they saw. The mainstream historians have an answer for all of this, and we are going to give it the full hearing it deserves, because it is a good answer. But hold on to this fact first, because it is the hardest one to dissolve. Piri-Reis did not claim to have discovered anything. He claimed to have copied. He pointed up the chain, and every serious investigation of this map eventually arrives at the same locked door. The source maps are gone. All right, deep breath. Let's be the cold-eyed historian for a few minutes, because the case against the Antarctica reading is real, and you deserve it straight. Argument 1. The parchment is torn. The bottom of the map ends in a ragged edge. The southern coastline doesn't end because the land ends. It ends because the gazelle-skin ends. Critics say that what looks like a deliberate Antarctic coast is really the coast of South America, bent sideways to fit the available space on the hide. Argument 2. The distortion. Look closely, and you'll see that South America's coast on this map seems to swing eastward at the bottom, almost 90 degrees, running the wrong way. Skeptics say Piri-Reis, working from incomplete Portuguese charts of a coastline nobody had fully sailed yet, simply ran out of room and turned the shore to make it fit the parchment. That bent coast, they argue, is not Antarctica. It is South America, folded like a letter to fit the envelope. Argument 3, and it is the heavy one. Timing. Antarctica wasn't even sighted by humans until 1820. The continent was not under ice for millions of years. Only in some abstract sense. The East Antarctic ice sheet is, by the geological consensus, tens of millions of years old. No anatomically modern human in any plausible timeline ever stood on an ice-free Queen Maud land and lived to draw it. To accept the ancient map theory, you don't just need a lost civilization. You need one that predates the ice itself. And that is a very, very tall order. And there is a quieter, smarter rebuttal too. The one I find hardest to wave away. It is called pattern matching. Give a clever human a wiggly inked coastline and a wiggly real coastline, and let him slide them around, rotate them, stretch them, and eventually something will seem to line up. Our brains are machines for finding faces in clouds. The skeptics say the Antarctic match is a face in a cloud, a coincidence that we wanted to be a message. So why, after all those rebuttals, does this map refuse to die? Why are we still talking about it 500 years later? Because the skeptics, for all their good arguments, have never fully closed 3 doors. And the first door is the one that keeps me up at night. Door 1. The inland detail. If that southern coast is just a bent around South America, then why does it show mountain ranges? In the interior, ranges that, on the real continent, are buried under ice and were only detected by seismic survey. In 1949, you can fold a coastline to fit a page. But how do you fold in mountains nobody could see? Door 2. The longitude problem. To draw an accurate world map, you need to measure longitude, your east-west position on the globe. And measuring longitude at sea was so brutally difficult that European civilization didn't crack it until the 1,760 seconds. With the marine chronometer, ships were lost for centuries for want of it. And yet Hapgood and others argued that the relative longitudes on these old charts are too good, suspiciously good, as if drawn by someone who already knew how to measure the world. Door 3. He is not alone. The Piri-Reis map is the most famous, but it is not the only so-called out of place chart. There is the Orontius Phineas map of 1531, which appears to show Antarctica entire, with rivers and coastlines and an ice-free interior, 289 years before anyone officially saw the place. There is the Haji Ahmed map, the Mercator, the Buash. Hapgood looked at all of them and saw the same fingerprint, fragments of a single, older, lost source map of the whole Earth. So let's go where Hapgood went. Let's say, just for the length of this scene, that he was right, that somewhere behind all these maps is a single lost original. Who drew it? Hapgood called them the Sea Kings, a vanished maritime civilization, global in reach, advanced enough to measure longitude, to survey coastlines, to chart a planet, and then to be erased so completely that all we have left is the reflection of their work in the copies of their copies. And here is where before history connects back to itself. Because we've stood on this ground before. The end of the last ice age, the Younger Dryas, was a planet-breaking event. Sea levels rose by hundreds of feet. Entire coastlines, where humans had lived for thousands of years, vanished underwater. Land bridges drowned. If there ever was a coastal, seafaring people mapping the world 12,000 years ago, the rising seas would have swallowed their cities first. Maybe that is the real story. Not aliens, not magic, just US, an earlier US, further along than the textbooks allow, cut down by a catastrophe, reduced to scattered survivors, clutching the one thing worth saving. The maps passed hand to hand for 10,000 years, copied by scribes who no longer understood what they were copying, until one of them reaches the table of an Ottoman admiral in 1513. Here is where the honest scholar and the dreamer have to share the room. The skeptic is probably right about the details. The southern coast is very likely a distorted South America. The longitude is probably better luck than legend. The Antarctic match may well be a face in a cloud. Most working historians would tell you the case is closed. And yet, the map keeps asking one question that no rebuttal has ever fully silenced. How did a man in 1513 draw a southern continent at all? Antarctica would not be officially sighted for another 307 years, even if his coast is bent around South America. Even granting every skeptical point, the impulse, the instinct to put land down there in the far south, where nothing was known to be. Where did that come from? You don't draw a coastline you've never heard of. Somebody, somewhere up that chain, put it there for a reason. That is what I keep coming back to. Not the proof. There isn't any, but the unease, the sense, standing in front of that gazelle skin, that we are looking at an echo, a signal, bounced down through 10,000 years of darkness, degraded, distorted, copied by hands that didn't understand it, but still carrying, faintly, the shape of something that someone really saw. The Piri-Reis map is real. You can see it for yourself in Istanbul. What it proves depends on how much you're willing to fold, to make the world fit your page. But that southern coast, that long, impossible shore at the bottom of the Parchment, is still down there, under the real ice, frozen and silent, keeping its secret. And the source maps that Piri-Reis swore he copied from are still out there too, somewhere, lost or buried or waiting. If you want to keep chasing the things history dropped in the dark, the drowned continents, the buried temples, the maps of a world before us, subscribe to Before History, because the further back we look, the stranger we get. See you in the next one. Yes, embedded in closing vow. No cadence promise.